So about a month ago, I offered a pretty unique private mentorship opportunity just for syndicate members. And I had one student actually take me up on it, and he ended up sending me a session, a track that he's been working on, and this is it in front of you right here. So basically what I did is I went through track by track and helped him eliminate all the problems. So if there was a sample that wasn't working, I helped him replace it, and I explained to him why the sample that he chose was not the right choice and why the one that we replaced it with was a much better one. Same thing going for all of the synths and all the sound effects and everything that he had going on in his track. So basically it was a complete producing session, and it's basically about four or 5 hours long, broken up into two-hour videos. So it was a lot of work, but it was so revealing in terms of it's not a lot of rocket science. I mean, the choices that I helped him figure out how to make were not these like, oh my gosh, incredible. They're small, tiny little things, but sometimes, you know, I do provide feedback for the syndicate members on their entire track, but this obviously takes a lot more time and attention and detail to go through a session to go track by track like that. And sometimes that's what it takes though. You have to understand where in your session things started going wrong. And so for this student, he started discovering pretty quickly some of the choices that he was making that was preventing his track from getting accepted onto a lot of opportunities. So this video series that I'm making available to you today is for a very specific kind of producer. So if you're a producer that hasn't been accepted by many or maybe any music libraries yet, and you normally are facing either rejections or just non-responses, you're not getting any responses back from opportunities or libraries that you're sending to. Most of the time, I'd say 90% of the time, it's because your tracks are not on par with the professionals, okay? Your tracks might sound dated, they might sound noisy, the mixing might not be there, it might not be loud enough. There are so many issues that could be getting in the way. And one of the biggest ones is obviously using the wrong samples, using the wrong kick and snare samples and synth samples and all that kind of stuff. It's a big, big problem with producers. So if that's you, and you're facing a lot of rejection, or you're not seeing that, like, or you just haven't submitted yet, but you just don't think that your tracks are there yet, this is the video series for you to walk through. It is going to take some time. Like I said, it's about four hours for the producing side of the mentorship, and then it's another, I think, 3 or 4 hours for the mixing and mastering side. So there's actually about 7 or 8 hours of content here. So it's a lot to unpack, and you can do it bit by bit, but you are going to learn exactly what's been going wrong with your tracks when you see how this student was making his choices and how we sort of corrected those choices. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to play you the before and after. So I'm going to play the track that he sent me before I ever touched it and before I sent it over to Trevor, our mixing and mastering professional, who does do mixing and mastering for the TV film world all the time. That's his full-time job. So he knows what he's doing. He's a professional. And basically, after I helped this student help with the production and the synth choices and all that kind of stuff, Trevor took it over and then helped him walk through the entire mixing and mastering process. So this is a professional in this industry specifically, not in the record industry, not in another side of the music business, but actually the TV film licensing business. So he has techniques and skills and strategies to help you make sure that your tracks are ready to go for TV, ready to go for music libraries, okay? So he took it for the second half for another 3 or 4 hours. So it's a lot of content. It's a lot of great video. But you're going to hear right now what a difference just a couple of hours actually made to working with the student's track. So here's what his track sounded like when he first sent it to me. I'll play just various parts of it. So the idea is there, but it just, you know, it's not popping out of the speakers. It's not shining. It's not really grabbing me. It's also not hitting hard enough. I feel like it also had some issues with some noise and some reverbs that are actually getting in the way of it hitting harder. So here's what it sounds like after we replaced a lot of samples, a lot of sounds, and kind of restructured it and also mixed it for him at the end. we would completely restructured that course because that course definitely had sort of an 80s dated vibe. So we completely redid that course. So I'm going to do another before and after just on that course. So as you can hear, it's now modern, it's hitting hard, it's slamming, and just the mix feels more complete. The samples just feel warmer. They just feel more appropriate. So this was, again, in a couple of hours, we walked him through how to basically achieve this after product from where he had started. And I'm seeing some incredible benefits from this because this particular student, the tracks that he sent over to my opportunities, since he's gone through this process, are so much stronger, so much like on par with following references, making a modern sound, having his track and his mix feel better. And a lot of what he learned in this process, I will tell you, is cutting the fat. There's a lot of producers that are stacking up way too much stuff in their track, and that might be you. Do you ever get lost in a track where you have way too much going on? You're gonna find out through this process, through these videos, what you need to be cutting out, what frequencies you should be cutting out, how you should be eliminating noise right away so that as you build more and more in your track, you're not just stacking a bunch of noise and problematic frequencies on top of each other. That's another thing. Problem frequencies, you got to get rid of those as soon as possible. So I show you kind of how to notice them, how to look for them, and how to basically eliminate them right off the bat. So this is a crazy in-depth sort of training that I don't think you can find anywhere else online. I haven't seen it definitely this long, this extensive, the amount of content that's going to be in this for you. I don't think you're going to find that in another place. And now you can see for yourself and hear what the before and after product sounds like. So if your tracks are kind of sounding more like this before track, you want them to sound more like this. Then this is going to be the course for you, okay? So if you'd like to enroll, you can click on the button below this video. And right now what I'm going to do is give you a little preview of the various parts of the video series. So you can see for yourself some of the valuable lessons. I mean, I've only stacked a couple of them in there, but you're going to see some of the valuable lessons that you're going to get as a part of this entire program. So enjoy the preview. Let's go ahead and go through your track now then. Okay, so far, let me start with what I love. Your vocal samples are money, man. That's one of the best things about this track that's really working for it. Those are very modern. You've definitely like sort of, you heard those probably in references or in, you know, some sort of tutorial video that I put together. And so you obviously know that that's what you should be doing. So yeah, kudos to you on the vocals. Melodically, I love where these verses are going. They're really mellow. They're really chill. Some of the samples, the plucks and stuff, I think they can be, excuse me, a little bit stronger. But I think you got the idea. Like, this is definitely feeling like a modern track, and it feels good, right? So just emotionally, this feels modern. It feels definitely like tropical pop. So you got a lot of stuff great that's going on. What I'm not really digging is there's a lot of stuff with the drums that are kind of bothering me. So there's a little bit of a blown out sound, kind of like the kick is almost a little bit blown out, a little bit distorted. I'm also hearing a lot of reverb, like kind of almost like that really slapback reverb thing that's happening in some of your percussion, and I kind of found where it is in some of your stems. So we'll go through that and kind of pick that apart and show you why that kind of reverb is really not doing you that well. Some reverb can be really great, but some reverb can just add noise to a track, and a lot of the reverb that I'm hearing on yours is basically just adding noise and clouding up kind of your mix a little bit. So we're gonna try to clean that up a little bit. Okay, so that transition to me was fairly unfulfilling because it didn't pay off. I felt like that the rise was there. There was something cool happening. I like the drum fill. You have the sound effect riser and all that cool stuff. The intensity built up, but when that chorus hit, it just was sort of, you know, we're rising, we're rising, we're rising, and then we just kind of went down to a 5. dun. It just felt like we just went to another verse or something. So I didn't feel this really intense boom, you know, like kind of smack people in the face with your chorus. And that's what you got to do with modern pop, modern dance music. Like the choruses have to be on 10. That's kind of one of the things that's happening with modern music. So we're going to work on that transition. That's one of the big things we need to sort of fix up. This chorus overall feels like an 80s chorus, especially I'll even solo out the sort of big the big problem there. It was, let's see, I think it was this one. You know, that reminds me of either like some old, like an old Cher song, or like just something from the, like, you know, late 80s, early 90s kind of a thing. So the melodic progression, the rhythm, and the sound of that synth is definitely pulling this track away from 2018. And probably these ones I'm going to cut out a little bit. I want those to be really just on the high end of the frequency spectrum. I really don't want those taking up any of the low ends. So let me just see what happens when I cut out pretty much all the low. Let's see what's going on with that. So Kit, I want to make sure you can hear that. So when I'm cutting out those low end frequencies, that, yeah, there's something happening down there with this shaker. Do you notice how it's cleaning up the mix though? The mix feels a little bit tighter when I get rid of those.
Yeah, I hear the difference.
So now I'm listening back to it, I'm catching things that I didn't really hear before, man. So like this one, this is getting in the way of this lead now, so we're gonna have to refinesse this a little bit, and maybe turn down a little bit, or scoop out some parts of it that just aren't really working. Some of the snare now feels way too bright, so we're gonna have to maybe add a little bit more low into it. So there's a couple of things, obviously, as you play back, it's really important once in a while to just step out, you know, look at that 10,000 foot view, kind of just see what's going on in the entire track, just to make sure that you're still on track for where you want to go. And it is an issue with a lot of people that, you know, because you probably came up learning how to produce when that music was hot, so this is all embedded in your head. Same for me. Like when I produce rock music, all the stuff that I produce a lot of times sounds like it's kind of late early 2000s, mid 2000s rock, which is kind of not relevant anymore now. Now it's like indie rock, softer rock, that kind of a thing. So there's a different sound going on. So I have to even like go like, okay, well, my natural inclination is I have to kind of steer myself away from it. So, but the best way to learn that is to listen to a lot of music. Obviously, I had this reference track up for that particular reason, so we could always go back and listen to it, make sure that it's good to go. But yeah, just get lost in new music, put it on your iPod, put it on your playlist as you're traveling, as you're going to the gym, working out. As you're just working through the day, and just put this in the background of your life and absorb it, and don't go back and always listen to the old tracks that you love, the 80s, the 90s, all that kind of stuff, because that will just keep seeping into your mind. It does take a little bit of a reinvention of yourself, but you can get there, absolutely. So I don't know if you've been noticing that, but when we go to our choruses, we just kind of suddenly feel a little bit bigger. It's not even like a noticeable thing, but like, or an obvious change, but like people will notice that there's something bigger about this chorus, and that snare is one of the biggest things, as opposed to the verse here. You see how it just feels much smaller. So when you were asking about like what do you do on the choruses, well, I typically stack a huge snare. This is that bigger snare that I liked. Remember, I kind of accidentally found it on top of the original. Even though it is EDM and it is grid oriented, as you can see, I did a lot of delaying here. So rhythmically, you know, there's a couple of ways you can do it. I mean, you could just perform it, right? And then not worry so much about quantizing it, but you just edit it so it feels right. But, you know, basically what really needs to be on the grid is your kick, your snare, probably your bass, you know, stuff like that. It just needs to kind of just sit a little bit more. I think even, but we might have even delayed our bass, I think. Yeah, we did quite a bit actually. So yeah, it's basically kick and snare. Those typically are what you want to be always right on the grid. But everything else, even if it's EDM and even if it is 4 on the floor and kind of, you know, synth-based music, if you want it to sound modern, it's got to have that like swing, that kind of like laid back feel.
It all basically boils down to like, what's my goal? what do I want? Not only sonically, but how do I want it to feel? What kind of things do I want to be loud, quiet? I kind of try and come up with those at the beginning. Because if I just kind of start and click like, okay, snare, let me mess with the snare. Like I have no idea how to piece the whole puzzle together, but I need to just kind of like when you buy a puzzle and and it's a whole picture. You got to constantly think of the whole picture before you start grabbing all the pieces. See how that ringing was kind of annoying, but it only happened during certain chords? It's probably because it should stay there. Now all I'm left is whatever's in the sides. And if I were to do the reverse, cut all the sides out, now I'm just left with whatever in the middle. Being able to do that is amazing because that allows us to control the sides and the mids separately. Usually we just leave the mids alone and enjoy kind of spicing up the sides to give a sound width. For EDM, for hip hop, for any kind of digital genre, I really like to brick wall my drums. And what that means is I don't use like an adaptive limiter kind of thing where it pulls the stuff down softly or whatever, like almost every limiter does. I like to use brick walls, and there's two in Logic. I know there's at least one in most DAWs. Usually they're in distortion plugins actually. So the two in Logic I use is this distortion button here. If I use the limiter, if I turn on the limiter, it sounds like that. If I turn on the distortion to soft, the limiter is trying to pull it down a little bit. The distortion is just straight cutting the top off and brick walling it. When you go to make stems for them, when you go to make a underscore version or drum and bass version, the effects that are on this channel strip are going to affect them much different because all this other stuff isn't happening now. So if you're hitting like a enhancer plugin and then enhancer plugin you dialed in to enhance pads and chords and leads and all this stuff, and then you mute all that stuff, now it's trying to do that to drums and bass and stuff even more.